Are you struggling for consistency in your sim racing? Does your iRating look like a roller coaster? If so, we have good news for you. The way to get more consistent is to first understand what you're doing differently than the professionals. And VRS is the answer. With our competitive subscription, you will have the telemetry, setups, tutorials, and everything else you need to fully analyze your driving. Our data packs and the ability to compare your driving with the best in the world will show you exactly where to adjust your inputs, change your driving line, and shave seconds off of your lap times. And our powerful and precise Direct Force Pro wheelbase and precision pedals are being used by some of the world's best drivers. All these champions agree that VRS hardware is not just the best on the market, it's also priced well below the competition. So if you're looking to upgrade to direct drive and the best pedals in sim racing, VRS is your answer. If you want to get better, get faster, and make it happen sooner rather than later, you owe it to yourself to find out why so many people are switching to VRS. You'll be so glad that you did. Visit www.virtualracingschool.com and learn why the best use VRS.
Well, hello and good evening, everybody. Welcome back to Apex Racing TV, and for one final time, welcome back to the 2024 Radical Americas Championship. This is the 12th and final round of the season, coming to you tonight from the Nordschleife. My name is Ron Mullins. Alongside me in the commentary booth is Charles Bichelle, and in the virtual production hauler, we have Joshua Wilkie. After 11 rounds and 12 races at a wide variety of tracks starting in February and stretching all the way through to tonight, we've got champions to crown and 2 more races left from what's been a fantastically entertaining season. And to do that, we're doing it at one of the most fearsome tracks of them all, with over 150 corners, no room for error, and a straightaway where just about any gap can disappear in the blink of an eye. This is truly the curveball to end all curveballs. Charles, this season has been a fantastic privilege to cover. It's been incredibly entertaining as well, but the fun is still far from over.
Yeah, it really has. I've really enjoyed doing the broadcast here for the Radical Americas series. It's been some fantastic racing, lots of competitive racing out on the track, and you're absolutely right. This is one of those tracks that it has no real comparison, to be fair. It is the most, as I tell everybody, this is the most challenging track that a driver can encounter during their racing career. It is just, it's 120 to 170 corners, depending on which configuration it is. And it's just, as you said, no room for error. One mistake and you're in the Armco, and then that's the end of your race because you've just completely destroyed your car. So it's going to be very interesting to see see how these drivers. Obviously, the sprint race is going to be very, very short. We're only talking about 3 laps. And then the feature race is going to be 45 minutes of wall-to-wall and door-to-door racing.
Yeah, and it's going to be racing to decide a championship in at least one of the categories. Usually we do this the other way, but I think for the final broadcast, we'll first touch on the AM Championship, because after a fantastic series of performances, that AM Championship is pretty much entirely decided. We'll get those championship points loaded up for you in just a couple of moments' time here on Apex Racing TV. And it's been a show of absolute dominance for the American Andy Vogel. He's the one that's taking the championship when everything is said and done. Entering this race, he has an untouchable gap. He's not even racing here tonight, folks. He was absolutely untouchable in the AM category. However, that fight for P2 is insane. You've got Adrian Fernandez, Joel Jacklin, and Charles Krasik all covered by just 5 points between those 3 drivers. So that is going to be a tantalizing fight for the final 2 spots in that AM category. But our congratulations go out to Andy Vogel. He's a driver that I've run against in the Radical Official Series in the past. He is incredibly quick, and he has proved that and then some across the races we've had from the 2024 Radical Americas Championship. He is your AM champion. The pro standings, though, is where the story gets a bit more interesting. It was a 3-horse fight for the longest time. However, coming into the last race, it's really just 2. And you've got the heavy hitters. You've got Lucas Vieira, the Brazilian, at 280 points. He leads it over the young American Ryan Odo at 264. That has been a brilliant championship fight to follow all throughout this season. It's really been the 3 horsemen in the pro standings. Vieira, Odo, Sanchez, they are incredibly fast in these cars. They've proved that with not just their performances in this series, but they usually go out and perform in those Radical Official races as well for the Radical Esports Cup run by iRacing. They have been the forces to be reckoned with. Sanchez falling out of the championship fight after being a little bit spotty when it comes to his attendance in this series. But here's the standings when it comes to the pros. Vieira has that 16-point gap over Ryan Odo. However, if he finishes the sprint race that we have coming up in just a couple of minutes' time with a 20-point gap over Ryan Odo, that will seal the deal, and that will result in Lucas Vieira being our pro champion here for the 2024 Radical Americas Championship. And it should be noted that the top 13 finishers in the pro standings will be moving on to the finals, which I believe will be broadcasted here on Apex Racing TV in just a couple of weeks' time. That gives you more reason to stay tuned here to Apex so you don't miss that action. But speaking of action, Charles, we're in the midst of this qualifying session, and when it comes to that pro championship fight, looks like Ryan Odo is the first one to throw a punch.
Yep, he's thrown the first thrown the gauntlet down with a 620.5 4-second gap, and that gap is it's they're going to be very big because obviously this is a long lap, a long track. When you're talking about almost 6.5 minutes. So a 4-second gap really is not a lot in comparison. You're talking about a half second anywhere else as we see Rylan Richard coming around into this. And I'm just going to warn our viewers now. I think we've got the names of the drivers pretty well handled, but my German is not good. So some of these corners, I know a few of the corner names, but I won't say that I know all 100 and however many there are. So we will end up butchering a few of those during the course of this broadcast tonight.
Oh, my German ancestors, especially my German grandfather who migrated to this country back in the 20s, I believe. He is going to be rolling in his grave at this point if he hears some of the butchered German name pronunciations that I'm going to... I may not even attempt them, honestly. I think I'll maybe give the English pronunciations for some of them, but outside of that, I will not even dare with those. I feel like I would have to be fluent in German to even have an attempt at pronouncing any of those names, but still... Name pronunciations notwithstanding, this track is absolutely brilliant, and in these Radical SR10s, it usually puts on a fantastic show. This track with these cars was actually the first ever broadcast that I did here on Apex Racing TV. Although back in March of 2023, I had never done any sort of broadcasting point blank period and got teamed up with Aaron Smith, who you can hear on not just the Radical Official Series, but I've also been able to hear his voice throughout the entirety of the Radical European Championship season, which just wrapped up earlier on here on Apex Racing TV. Gotta send our congratulations to Andy Locke, the AM champion in that category, and the pro champion James Barry, who, as Sam Fitzpatrick here on Apex Racing TV said at the end of that broadcast, he may be one of the favorites heading into the finals in just a couple of weeks' time. But I think maybe I'm a little bit biased, but I think these American drivers are going to give them one hell of a challenge. And this may be one of those drivers that's going to give them a challenge. It's Joel Jacklin. He's currently running in the 4th position in this qualifying session. And one thing that we haven't really paid attention to thus far, Charles, is the fact that in the practice session earlier, which bearing in mind, was about 44 minutes long, if my memory serves me correctly. Only had like a handful of drivers set some practice laps, and in this qualifying session, only 8 drivers have set a lap time on the board, Lucas Vieira not being one of them.
Yeah, it's one of those, they extended the qualifying to 16 minutes to allow these drivers to get 2 full laps in. Obviously, the qualifying start is on the beginning of the Dottinger Hoe, which is the backstretch, coming into the final couple corners, and then back around to the start-finish line. So, yeah, a lot of people just said, I'm just not going to get out here and waste time with qualifying because, obviously, with a track like this, it's more about being consistent during the race than it is about your qualifying position. I think you get out there and just run a good race, and I think the positions you're going to find kind of take care of themselves as you capitalize on other people's misfortune.
And I gotta say, when it comes to the starts of these races, the main trouble is just heading through turn number 1, which according to iRacing is still marked as a Nord curve. I believe it has been renamed in honor of the late great Sabine Schmitz, who was the queen of the Nürburgring for many moons, who sadly lost her life due to battle cancer, if I remember correctly, just a couple of years ago. But still, this track, mega amount of challenge, and you got this mega straightaway, which I have seen decide many of these Radical SR10 races at this very track. And we're going to see it play a big factor in the races that we have to look forward to today. We got a 15-minute long sprint, which is set to get underway in just a couple of minutes' time. And then we have a 45-minute long feature where we may end up deciding a champion. We may end up deciding a champion in the sprint race if Lucas Vieira is going to give enough of a challenge to Ryan Odo, and Odo may get struck by a falling anvil between the start and the finish of that 15-minute long race, which around a racetrack like this, you could get struck by a falling anvil just based off the racing gods not liking the cut of your jib. But right his way around the final corner, Lucas Vieira going to jump up to the pole in convincing fashion at a 2-minute 19.156. That's nearly a second and a half in front of Ryan Odo in P2. Vieira dropping down the gauntlet in the dying stage of this qualifying session.
Absolutely great lap by Vieira to get that just under the wire. So great job by him. And yeah, so now we've got some competition up front, and it's the guys you would expect to see up front with Vieira and Odo, 1 and 2. Richard with a really good run. I mean, it's, like I said, it's 4 seconds, but I've seen races here, especially with cars that are really good with the draft. You'll gain a second of lap time just on the backstretch just by being behind another car. So 4 seconds is not as big as you think. And so it's going to be a very interesting race, especially with a standing start going down into turn 1.
I gotta say, this race start is looking increasingly more interesting just based off the fact we have some pretty heavy hitters that are going to be starting a little bit farther down. Franco Sanchez, yet to set a qualifying time, will be crossing the line in just a couple of moments' time. The driver who I have seen rip it in the past in this series already has a victory on the board, albeit very early on into the season. But Franco Sanchez, he's a driver that I have seen do very well in Radical SR10 races before, and I believe he is right towards the end of this qualifying lap. Gotta say, a little bit on the slower end, if I do say so myself. I know that's very fresh coming out of my mouth, considering I'm here in the broadcast booth rather than behind the wheel. But I don't think there's a very good lap time from Franco Sanchez, and it looks like it's going to be the only lap time that he sets coming across the line now. What is the lap time for the driver, the number 88 car from Peru? Is it even a time that can be set on the board, or did he pick up some sort of invalidation? I believe he may have, so that is going to be it for Franco Sanchez in this qualifying session with only 30 seconds left. Looks like Lucas Vieira going to put it on pole.
It does look that way. Yeah, look, I was checking the timing and scoring from SDK, and Franco's got 4 off tracks, and those could be anywhere, from the time he started to the time he finished. So it looks like he had at least one in that final lap, which invalidated his lap time, which is a real shame. But it's so easy to do here because obviously, you have to be almost inch perfect around the course, around this track, just to get a good lap time in. A lot of people will go in and just set a banker lap, maybe 10 seconds off their normal pace, just to get one in and then kind of push on that second lap. But like Sanchez was just kind of pushing from start to finish.
Yeah, the thing is, with trying to decipher where exactly a driver picks up some incident points, there's 154 opportunities around this racetrack. We're going to take a look at the final starting grid from a sprint race this season. Lucas Vieira going to be starting it on the pole. Ryan Oda going to join him on the front row. Rylan Richard going to be starting in P3. Charles Krasik in 4th. David Unger, the Australian, racing very early on into the morning, going to be starting in P5. Next to JR Gregory, Apex Racing TV Zone. Adrian Fernandez going to be starting in 7th. Joel Jacklin in P8. Jimbo Pfeiffer in 9th, Franco Sanchez in P10, John Benlid going to be starting this race in P11, Cedric Oyahan completing an all-Canadian 6th row, Tyler Vickery and Luis Pires going to round out the 14 starters that we have in the final sprint race of this season. We've had some pretty exciting sprint races thus far, and it looks like the action is going to continue here at the Nürburgring Nordschleife, the most fierce track that we've visited thus far this season. 154 corners in all, 14.17 miles, and it's 154 opportunities to go off the track and end up in a tire barrier or an Armco barrier, which, let's face it, folks, is not a mile away. You can hit one of those if you just sneeze the wrong way heading around a corner, but these drivers bracing, trying to get that start of this race underway, hoping for that green flag to come out and hoping to make it through turn 1 with their lives. I've seen in the past in radical official races on iRacing, usually the run through turn number 1 can end in some sort of disaster, especially in the mid-pack. With a somewhat smaller grid, we may not see that stick out too much at the start of this sprint race that we hope to get underway in just a couple of moments' time. Some drivers kind of staggering along a little bit farther in the back, giving us a small little time to take our breath, brace ourselves for what is going to be a fantastic conclusion to this 2024 Radical Americas Championship. The green flag is down. The drivers are on their way. It's a convincing start from our pole sitter of Lucas Vieira. Gonna cover it all from Ryan Odo, heading down into turn number 1. Gonna take the lead in convincing fashion. Looking at some drivers going side by side a little bit farther in the back. That, I believe, was David Unger going side by side with Vickery, unless I'm very much mistaken. Actually, that may have been Adrian Fernandez that he was side by side with just a couple of moments ago, but they have single filed out, heading down into Hotzenbach for the first time at the beginning of this race, but Vieira getting off to a flyer.
Yeah, good start by everybody. They just decided they were just going to take it easy. You know, once they got the cars rolling, they didn't really fight too hard going into one. Managed to get through Hotzenbach very safely as they're coming up now to Flugplatz for the first time.
And here we go, such a troubling corner in real life, but it's such a fast section, and in these cars with such a powerful draft, you can see it got put on full display right now. I think Ryan Oda may be sizing up a move on Lucas Vieira in the not-too-distant future, heading down into the first hairpin and one of the first heavy braking zones around this lap. Will Odo go for the move? We only have 3 laps to decide this sprint race, and this is the time to strike while the iron is hot if you're Ryan Odo, but playing the patient game early on, Charles.
Yeah, very much so. He just said, you know what, we're going to get these tires up to a good operating temp, which is probably about the half of the first lap. So we're just going to stay in line, get through as we come down through Foxhole, then up into the corner that I can't remember the name of currently, but that's fine. We'll get it all figured out as we go. But yeah, so far so good for everybody. Vieira's off to a little bit of a lead, but you can see just the train forming. There's a little bit of a gap between Richard and Krasik. And as we see a spinner there, that's Jimbo Pfeiffer going around, gets the car righted and back out on the track.
Pfeiffer having an off-track excursion early on into this race in the double zero car, and here is a replay to see what exactly went wrong for the Sector 5 racing driver, heading down into the corner, getting mega sideways in a simple spin. Big smoke show from him, nearly parked it out into the curb, but did not hit the wall and did not pick up any major damage on that Radical SR10 race car. However, he lost out on a whole lot of time. Looks like him and Luis Pires were briefly side by side. I believe that Pfeiffer is still behind Pires as it stands at the moment, running 11th and 12th respectively, with Vickery and John Benlid, I believe, not taking the start of this race. So not sure what happened there. I don't believe they're actually in the iRacing session. Ooh. As it stands currently, as that's an off-track for Pfeiffer a little bit farther in the back. There we go. That's Pfeiffer having that off-track excursion. Gotta say, Joel Jacklin must have just run into some difficulties as he's now behind the both of them, slotted in 12th at the moment. Let's see what happened here, Charles.
Yeah, it looked like he caught, as they were coming down that section, like he caught the inside curb. We'll see here, Jacqueline, as we'll see that just a little bit wide. Ooh, and then to check up on the brakes, and then into the, look like a soft barrier, and then they got the hard barrier. So, you know, tough luck there for Jacqueline. I don't see a lot of damage on the car. It was a glancing blow on both sides, so maybe maybe everything's still straight. He can continue on.
Oh, and that was full commitment from Adrian Fernandez, blinking in out of existence, but getting that moved on David Unger. That was a near disaster, heading through one of the fastest sections around this racetrack. And now David Unger feeling the burn. He's feeling the pain from the hot exhaust coming off the back of Fernandez's race car. The dirty air in these SR10s, which usually tend a bit more towards understeer, the dirty air can really play spoils. But Fernandez, full commitment there. I'm not even sure if you can take a look at a replay just based off the fact that Fernandez was blinking in out of existence. A sneak attack with some UFO activity going on with Fernandez. Gonna take a look at this replay to see him getting that move done there side by side, heading through into the corner, and some of the corners right before then. There you can see the blink for Fernandez, a little bit of contact before, then heading off into the corner. Fernandez looks like he gets that move done in pretty convincing fashion. Unger was the one trying to get back at him though, and drifted off onto the grass. So Fernandez already had gotten that move done. Unger was trying to get back at him with a little bit of a show of bravery / stupidity, whatever it may be, from Unger. These drivers can occasionally get caught up in the red mist. Believe me, as a driver myself, I have been there before. But in these SR10s, which tend a bit more towards understeer, heading through one of the fastest sectors of the lap, a move like that is kind of doomed from the start.
Yeah, it really was. And it's just as we see here as they're coming up through the jump, then around, it's just so crazy that Odo just driving. But you can just see the commitment that you have to get a fast lap around here as they're working their way down to the mini carousel, which is coming up in the next two corners. That Schwab Swats just before that. And here's the mini carousel. And you see, so now we're going to get the run down the straightaway here in the next, after two rights. And we're going to see what Odo's got, what he's going to try and make a move, or if he's just going to stay in line for this lap.
You know, Charles, we used to do some Formula V races together here on Apex Racing TV, and you used to describe those races as being 100-mile-an-hour game of leapfrogs. Here in the Radical SR10s, though, especially down this straightaway, it is a game of leapfrog for sure. Looks like Odo is going to be the one leaping in front of Vieira. However, based off the way this straightaway is, Vieira may have a good opportunity to leap back in front of Odo. That's a unique opportunity with this series. You have the opportunity down those straightaways to jump in front of your arch rival and arch nemesis down that straightaway, go in front of them, then tuck right back behind them at the end of the straightaway. But it looks like they're going to stay line astern as Odo gets that move done and is going to lead the first lap of this race. The game of leapfrog now is very much underway. Franco Sanchez trying to make his way up the running order. A little bit farther back of this man, Adrian Fernandez, who's slotted in fifth at the moment. Right behind him is our Apex Racing TV colleague, J.R. Gregory, that he can catch every single Friday on the Radical Esports Cup, broadcasted exclusively here on Apex Racing TV. He's running sixth at the moment. I gotta say credit where credit's due, and thank you to Mr. J.R. Gregory for filling in as a driver analyst, giving some insight while behind the cockpit for the last broadcast of this series, round number 11 at Spa. I was sadly succumbing to a cold at that point, so I was unable to call that race. But J.R. stepping in and helping out there, Charles. And Spa's usually a pretty good track for these race cars. I think you're probably treated to a pretty good show, as we're treated to another good show with this fight between Odo and Vieira. Still hot.
Absolutely, yeah. JR was a big help to me because it would have been a very, very, very difficult race to do solo. But yeah, great race though. Great battles all over the track. It was fantastic, and it was good to have JR jump in when he wasn't battling with the other car out there, and just kind of talking everybody through everything. So it was really awesome to be able to do that.
I gotta say, I believe JR is still hanging around the Discord server. We may drag him in at some point during this race. maybe during the feature, the 45-minute long feature a little bit later on tonight here on Apex Racing TV, drag him in and try and do a quick interview going down the start-finish straightaway. That would be interesting. I'm not sure if that's ever really been done before. That's really the only opportunity around this racetrack where we can have a chat. I remember on a Radical official broadcast about 2 seasons ago here on Apex Racing TV, I used to do that series for about a year. Then I kind of stepped out of the broadcaster's booth and did a broadcast there as a driver analyst, and they dragged me into the commentary booth running around Sebring, and have it be known that that was very difficult trying to I mean, I find it's second nature for me to run my math for extended periods of time, but driving while running my math was a quite difficult challenge. So I can imagine here at this racetrack with 154 corners and basically no opportunity at all to have any sort of breathing room, that is an extra hard thing to try and do. At this point in time, these drivers feeling no brakes, and neither is Odo and Vieira, as they're still covered by only about a half a second.
Yeah, absolutely. And I was watching earlier as Odo was coming around the corner. I think it Mesketsfeld, he was just almost sideways, just trying to hang on to the rear end of the car. So he's definitely got the car trimmed out, which is going to make it a handful, especially as you get more and more use out of those tires. And obviously with 150 some odd turns, you're going to use the tires quite a bit. So he's kind of working hard. They've already kind of stretched that gap out over Richard. It's now 4.5 seconds. But Richard he's also stretched that gap out to those 3 AM drivers. We see Vieira as around Odo.
There we go. The game of leapfrog is still going to continue between those two, between now and the checkered flag of this 15-minute long race. And these drivers may be going to be a little bit more risky because, as we mentioned at the top of the show, they're fighting for a championship. At this point in time, the thing that Odo needs to do to have any sort of hope in fighting for the championship is finish in front of Vieira. That is his one and only goal, and I think he's going to do it at any sort of opportunity. Gotta say, Ryan Odo, a very respectable young man. He has been a fantastic driver to follow throughout this season. I'm not sure exactly how old he is. I believe he's younger than me, but he was feeling the burn from Vieira as they go side by side, hang through one of the fastest sections of this racetrack. Vieira getting the move done around the outside. That's still some bravery, even though it looks fairly blasé. That was still a bold move from Lucas Vieira. These cars tend towards understeer, and as we were riding on board about a lap ago with these drivers, I'm curious, Josh, you could possibly ride on board with these drivers yet again, because following a Radical SR10 around this racetrack, just looking at the onboard shot, you can just... I'm not even sure the best way I can describe it. I can best describe the feeling as like drinking a really strong energy drink when you're a young kid, or even like being electrocuted or something like that. You just have this weird pinging feeling of anxiety seeing these cars run around this racetrack as full bore as they are.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, you were talking about that pass that Vieira made. That is I guess the second fastest part of the track is Klostertal. That's the hill coming up toward the castle at Nürburgring. And then we talked. You mentioned Bravery as Bravery Corner, or Mutkurve, as it is in German. And that is, I think, just about flat out in these cars through there. So as they're working their way back around Schwalbenschwanz, getting ready for the second carousel. And then we'll make that run down the Dottinger Hoe again, and we'll see if Odo does the same thing and just works his way around.
Yeah, let's see round number 2 for the game of leapfrog between Ryan Odo and Lucas Vieira. Odo's going to be the one in the drift. Vieira's going to be the one punching that hole in the air, and we're going to see that game of leapfrog definitely continue. I have a feeling whoever's leading it going on to the start-finish straightaway, not even the start-finish straightaway, the long straightaway that we have on this lap is probably going to be the one taking the checkered flag on both of the races that we have. But gotta say, it looks like Ryan Odo off a little bit going down that straightaway, not trying to get that move done, so exercising a little bit of patience and really just saving up that run for this downhill blast heading into the final few corners around this racetrack. But it looks like he's going to have to entirely back out of it, because that section, especially in a Radical SR10, is tricky enough single-filed, let alone side-by-side. So Odo backing out of it. Meanwhile, looking at the fight, with Unger right now. He's running in the 8th position right in front of Franco Sanchez. This is going to be some whole cold-blooded stuff between these two. Side by side now, going downhill, then back uphill, and Sanchez getting that move done in beautiful fashion on David Unger.
Yeah, it was a great move. Obviously, we're going to see a lot of passes there, especially in the next race. And to me, for just going back and thinking about what Odo was doing, I'm thinking he was maybe timing that straightaway to see how late he could leave it to make that pass, so Vieira would not have a chance to return the favor going down into Tiergarten. So I think he might have been looking at a little strategy there for that lap.
Yeah, possibly maybe just setting himself up well, which in these races can play a huge factor. Gotta say, though, you could see just riding on board with the back of Lucas Vieira's race car, looking back at Ryan Odo, the dirty air was such a big difficulty for Odo a couple moments ago, heading through Flugplatz. There we go. That's my first attempted German pronunciation. Hopefully I didn't entirely kill that, otherwise I may get banned from the butcher shop here in the city of Philadelphia that my grandfather used to own just because of that terrible pronunciation. But looks like they're still back line astern, heading down now through one of the fastest sections of this lap. Odo flashing his headlights. Gotta say, Odo's usually a calm, cool, and collected driver. We have seen him go through a whole lot of challenges thus far this season. He has gone tit for tat with Lucas Vieira ever since the drop of the green flag for the opening race of the season at Monza all the way back in February here on Apex Racing TV. Haven't really seen him get that aggressive and start to flash those headlights a little bit, but coming to the final lap of this race, this is the final lap of the race with only 30 seconds left on the clock. Odo, seeing an opportunity to win the championship, slowly slipped through his fingers on this lap.
Yeah, you know, obviously a lot of lap left here. So we won't say it's done and dusted just yet, because obviously, as you see there with Vieira just kind of clipping the curb coming through that corner, you know, obviously mistakes can still be made. Richard doing a great job, still running there for only 8 seconds behind the 2 leaders, Krasik in 4th. So still plenty of racing left up front and still moves yet to be made, I'm sure.
Yeah, there is definitely going to be something in these drivers' back pockets come time for the end of this race. There's our buddy J.R. Gregory. He's running 6th at the moment. Kind of a no man's land currently. However, he is heading through one of the most enjoyable sections of this lap. That corner I always find to be a whole lot of fun, depending on what kind of race car I'm attempting to tackle it in. Gotta say, there's certain cars around this racetrack on the iRacing platform that I think are just actually impossible. I've tried driving the Super Formula around this racetrack in the past, and it's like trying to pick up antimatter with chopsticks. You just can't do it. But these drivers in the SR10s still having a whole lot of fun driving these cars, and coming to the end of this second to last race from this season, the final sprint, and this is the final sprint of the checkered between these two. Vieira and Odo, oh so close, heading through one of the fastest sections of the lap, heading into the first carousel for the final time. Will Odo try and go for a move before that long straightaway towards the end of the lap, or do you think he's going to exercise a bit more patience?
Yeah, I think he's going to kind of hang out. I think that, like I said, I think the run down Dottinger the last time was kind of an experiment. So I think that's where he's thinking. Obviously, I'm kind of trying to read minds here, but you know, that's obviously the best place to make a move. The track's very wide, and it's a straightaway. You've got one bend that's flat out, and then downhill before you get into Tiergarten, as we see David Unger here coming through this section. And looks like he's had better days. Yeah, that front of that car looks pretty messed up. He says, you know what? I think I'm going to tow it.
Yeah, I can't necessarily blame him for that at all. We may see some body work from a Radical SR10 end up for sale on eBay by the end of this race. That car was looking in pretty rough shape, and he is going to call it a day. Tough stuff from him, because he was having a pretty good show, and a reminder to anyone who's tuned into this series for the first time, the finishing order from this first race is going to set our starting grid for the second race, set to begin in the not too distant future. But at this point in time, the future is looking a little bit bleak for Ryan Odo. He needs to hope for a miracle heading into this final race with a 16-point gap between himself and Lucas Vieira in the championship lead. But as it stands currently, I believe Vieira with this victory would be able to seal the deal in the Pro Championship here from the 2024 Radical Americas Championship. Vieira, at this point though, he has still got one more long flat-out blast to try and hang on. Odo, meanwhile, I think as much as he has been an incredibly patient, incredibly respectful, and also incredibly consistent driver from this series, I think it now comes a time to throw caution to the wind, say screw it, and try and go for a move. Vieira, he's going to be focusing all his attention, all his energy on getting the best exit he can going onto this straightaway for the final time in the final sprint race of this season. Gonna get the flyby of these two cars. That gap is closing between the two of them. It was 0.3 of a second, now it's 0.2 of a second, now it's under a tenth. They're side by side. Odo trying to get that move done on Vieira. They're gonna be side by side going down that back straightaway. Vieira tucking into the draft. Odo weaving like a madman. He wants nothing to do with the side-by-side finish. He wants to grab the victory because that's the only thing keeping his championship hopes alive. But here comes Vieira. Vieira trying to get that move done back on Odo. Whoa. They're side-by-side. They come to blows. That's a hellacious collision for Lucas Vieira. That car is ready for the scrap heap. Ryan Odo going to be riding his way around the final few corners. Vieira's car is destroyed. That car is smoking. He may have to settle for a last place finish if he can't get that car going. That is going to be a heartbreaker for Lucas Vieira, the driver of the 170 car, trying to get a move done to seal the deal in the Pro Championship. Looks like he's going to have to settle with a last place finish. A heartbreaker for the Brazilian. Ryan Odo wins it when everything is said and done. Ryland Richard ends up finishing in P2. Charles Krasik is going to be our highest finishing AM driver, but Lucas Vieira having a major source of drama, and he's towed back to the pits. Vieira with a heartbreaker at the end of this sprint race.
Yeah, I think we need a couple of replays of that incident. It was very, very close, obviously, but just from first glance, I couldn't tell if Vieira tried to make the move over, thought he was clear of Odo, or if Odo moved. So we'll have to, before we start throwing blame, obviously Vieira got the worst end of it. It looked like once the car came to a stop, the back tire was not touching the ground, so he couldn't move forward, and just had to tow it back. And that's just a sad way to finish, but it happens very frequently here. Last lap drama just seems to be the norm here at the Nürburgring.
And the last lap drama can arise at any point in time. I think we should probably take a look at some replays when everything is said and done. Vieira now dropping back still. Jimbo Pfeiffer still running out there on the racetrack. But Vieira, he's going to have to settle with a finish of either 10th place or worse. I believe it will be worse. I believe he will be classed even behind the driver who's going to be the last to take the checkered flag, that being Pfeiffer. But Vieira trying to get that move done. Odo turning in. And you can see that horrible collision. Ooh. Double impact for Lucas Vieira. That was one of the hardest and one of the fastest crashes that we've seen thus far this season. And it was one of those moves that was definitely, it was a high risk for sure from Lucas Vieira and Ryan Odo trying to cover it off. I'll be brutally honestly, JR, from my perspective, that looked like a little bit of a turn in on desperation. I gotta say, Lucas Vieira, just from my perspective, kind of contributed to that as well. It looked like he was trying to go as straight as possible, entering one of the final corners around this racetrack. He wanted to make life miserable for Ryan Odo to make sure that one of them was going to make the checkered flag. Sadly, the ones that make it to the checkered flag is going to be Ryan Odo. However, when it comes to that championship fight, that is going to be a game changer.
Yeah, for sure. Obviously, that puts Odo right back into the championship battle. But yeah, it's so close either way. I couldn't really say that Odo was just intentionally turned in to try and hit the back of his car. As you can see, the tire just spinning because it's not making contact with the dirt. So because it kind of looked on that last replay from the suspension that it did look like Vieira kind of straightened the corner out a bit as well. We get a replay here. Yeah, side by side, coming down to that opening corner for Tiergarten. Definitely see Odo moving over. Yeah, I think he just moved over a little bit early, like he might have been trying to tuck in to get a little more draft going into Tiergarten for a late break attempt. But yeah, just did not quite have it cleared.
Yeah, I'm honestly, JR, taking a look at another angle of this. In the grand scheme of things, I think both of them kind of contributed to the incident.
Yeah.
But it's such a heartbreaker for the both of them. As much as Odo really, with that move and that collision, that really saves his championship fight. Sadly, I'm not sure if we can get someone from the Radical Americas series to give us an update in terms of how the point standings are looking at, because the race admins handle the points. That's not something that can be looked at in iRacing. Believe me, I've already checked, folks. But at this point in time, Vieira, he's about to get overtaken by Jimbo Pfeiffer. Is going to be the last of the finishers in this race, and there's that overtake. Vieira, he's already long and gone. He's probably off. Maybe using the bathroom, maybe grabbing an adult beverage, but the fight is still not over yet for Vieira. We've seen Vieira overcome mighty challenges this season. My mind harkens back to Phillip Island, the feature race there, 45 minutes in length. He came into the pits after the end of the first lap as a result of a collision between himself and Ryan Odo, and he came back to win that race, and that was really the point where Lucas Vieira was like, hey, I'm in it to win it, folks. And that was really what set up this championship fight with himself and Ryan Odo. But at this point in time, I think it is a heads-up fight between the two of them. That is for darn sure. It is going to be a wild end to this season. That is for darn sure. It's been a blast, though. It has absolutely been exciting from start to finish. And I think, Charles, I'll let you give your extended thoughts and go on for as long as you can as I try and look through the rule book and try to figure out how points are allocated.
Well, I will say this. We've continuously talked about the championship fight, and in reality, it's a bragging rights title, right? It's just, hey, I finished first in this group. Because, we've got several cars that are going to end up going to the World Finals from here, both in the pros and the AMs. So there's no real necessarily Radical Americas Championship. It's just basically an extended qualifying for that World Finals series or race. So, once again, everybody wants to be first. That's why you race. You want to go out to win the race. And if you get out there and you have enough points that you can say, hey, I finished the highest, I'm the champion of the Radical Americas, you're going to invent that. So, you're going to invent that title whether it exists or not. And you're going to say, hey, I was the best of the group. So, it's I know it's still a rough way to end a round or end a race with contact. But like I said, this track just invites that with that long straightaway. I've seen 8-car pileups in single make races in other series, going down into Tiergarten, and the guy that was running in 7th ended up winning the race. So it doesn't surprise me that we had a little drama with the front runners at the end of this.
And thank you very much, Charles, for that, because in that brief little break, I've been able to try and figure out the championship scenario. So coming into this final round of the Radical Americas Championship, it was 16 points between Lucas Vieira leading the championship and Ryan Odo in P2. That move, as much as it wasn't really championship deciding, but it was certainly championship helping for Vieira if he was able to get that move done successfully on Ryan Odo, because that would have given him a 17-point gap coming into the last race of the season. And considering the participation that we have, I believe that would have pretty much entirely put the championship in the hands of Lucas Vieira. But because of that incident, though, with the fact that I believe when everything is said and done, unless I'm very much mistaken, Lucas Vieira ends up finishing that race in P12, so he does not score a single point Instead, Ryan Odo grabs the maximum amount of points available from one of those sprint races outside of the bonus point given for incident points. However, that is not really something that any of these drivers are really going to qualify for, if I'm being completely honest. Oh, thank you very much, Josh. I was looking away from my screen, so I couldn't even see that you brought up the results. So Ryan Odo, with that sprint race victory in very controversial fashion, he has closed up that gap within 6 points. So it's only 6 points between those two drivers coming into the last race of this season, the last future race as well. So here's the championship situation. If Ryan Odo wins it and Lucas Vieira finishes in P4, that will result in a tie, and I'm not sure who would win the tiebreaker as a result of that. But really the goal for Lucas Vieira is to finish P4 or better, because if he finishes in 4th, that would be a tiebreaker. Really, P3 and better is the goal, because if he finishes P3, he'll win the championship by 2 points. P2, he'll win the championship by 4 points. And if he ends up winning it, then he'll end up winning the championship by a bigger gap than he had entering this race. So we've got a small little break before we go into the race. I think we'll drag in JR for a quick little chat before we move into the second race. JR, we have a quick little time before the end of this warm-up session, just talking through championship implications. So talk us through the first race there.
You know what? I was just grinning from ear to ear, man. The more time I spend in this car on this track, the more I appreciate the SR10. It is absolutely made for this place. It devours it, and the way to make it go faster is just have confidence in the massive grip that it has. And man, oh man, it was a complete blast. And I got a little bit lucky. I was pushing Fernandez a little bit, and I'm not sure if you were watching, but he made a couple mistakes that allowed me to close the gap and take advantage of the draft down the back straight. So man, oh man, P4 overall and P2 in class. I couldn't be happier. And now it's time for the feature. I'll catch you guys later.
Yeah, we will catch you as well, JR. Good luck, my man. I say that right as I drag him out of the commentary booth. But JR gonna be starting this race in 4th. Let's take a quick look through the starting grid, the final starting grid from the 2024 Radical Sim Racing America's Championship. Ryan Odo going to be starting on the pole. Rylan Richard going to join him on the front row. Charles Krasik in P3. JR Gregory in 4th. Adrian Fernandez in 5th. Franco Sanchez in 6th. Cedric Oyahan in P7. Joel Jacklin in P8. Luis Pires in 9th. David Unger, the Australian, in P10. Jimbo Pfeiffer in 11th. Lucas Vieira on the comeback tour. He wants to finish 3rd or better to try and win this championship. Tyler Vickery and John Benlid going to be starting on the back row. John Benlid did not take the start of that first race. I doubt very highly he will be here to take the start for the second one. But, oh man, Charles, it's been a great season, and it looks like this season is about to come to a close. The drivers are already revving up their engines. Not sure how much time we have left to go until we grab the green. Final thoughts heading into the final race.
Yeah, for Odo, it's as we get the start, nice start by the group. Looks like everybody's going to go a little double wide there, back around P5 or 6. Looks like everybody is through. For Odo, it's basically just run your race. Just be consistent. Don't make any major mistakes, obviously, but don't really push harder than you need to. For Vieira, it's going to be first recognize who's around you. You were running in the top 2 for the first race. The cars that you're with now are going to be significantly slower than you over the course of the lap. So be patient, work your way through, get up toward the front, get clear, get some clear air, and then just floor it at that point.
Yeah, I have to say I'm with you there, JR. If you're Ryan Odo, you just need to run your own race and gun it. That is really the best advice that we could give him. Same goes for Vieira. He is gunning it. He is trying to get that move done as quickly as he possibly can, slipping his way up into 8th. But look at this, Rylan Richard and Ryan Odo side by side. Very beginning of the race, and Richard going to get the move done around the outside, heading into one of the first heavy braking zones around this lap. Rylan Richard now leading over Ryan Odo in P2, Charles Krasik in 3rd, Adrian Fernandez in 4th, JR Gregory losing out on a spot in that fight with himself and Fernandez. 2 drivers running in the AM category, trying to challenge Charles Krasik for the final AM victory of this season. Franco Sanchez running in 6th, and right behind him is the Brazilian, the flying Brazilian, Lucas Vieira, trying to come back from the brink of absolute disaster. He's got his back to the ropes, and he is still swinging up 5 spots so early on into this race. We've got 45 minutes, probably even more than that, Charles. We've got a whole lot of racing action to look forward to, a pit stop as well, but even though we've got so much to look forward to in this race, Vieira going balls to the wall.
Yeah, he's got a really good start. He's cleared a lot of the traffic that he was faster than, so now he's back up on Sanchez, who he's raced with up near the front of the field basically every race this season. So now he's got a good partner that he can kind of work with, that he knows that he's raced with, like as I said. So see if they work together to try to work their way up toward the front.
Yeah, some of these drivers may decide to work together as teammates. We've seen some pseudo-teammate work in the past. Certainly won't rule it out in the series finale. Gotta say, Lucas Vieira dealing with another South American of the Peruvian driver of Franco Sanchez. Going to get that move done coming out of the corner. Looks like Sanchez not really challenging him too much. Those two drivers have been battling for wins thus far this season. Sanchez has won. Vieira has as well. Vieira was on track to maybe grab the victory in that sprint. However, things just did not work out. Gotta say, though, credit where credit's due to Sanchez, who had a few things going his way. He may have been involved in that championship fight. He is going to bat. Speaking of going to bat, Odo trying to get that move done on Richard, heading down through one of the fastest sections of this lap with a little bit of lawn mowing. Ryan Odo going to get that move done to retake the lead of this race. 3.5 minutes in. Whole lot of time left to go, but these drivers are still battling hard. And I think Ungar's had a moment. He's had to tow back to pit lane. So the Australian having a truly disastrous race meeting. Vieira, meanwhile, having a fantastic start, now making his way up to 5th.
Yeah, he's doing a great job as both him and Sanchez have got past J.R. Gregory, and so they're just steadily climbing the ladder. I think Sanchez maybe not as comfortable at this track as Vieira, so I think he's decided he's going to play, I guess, second fiddle and just rear guard and follow the leader. So that's what he's going to do, and he'll work his way up and just stay behind Vieira as best he can. As you already see that Vieira has kind of checked out just a little bit, kind of put himself a nice gap back to Sanchez as he's climbed up on the back of Fernandez.
And I gotta say, there's a little bit of a gap between Krasik and Fernandez to have those two drivers break their way up into the front fight, and even a gap between Richard and Krasik for P2 and P3. Looking at that right now, Fernandez and all those drivers still running strongly. Odo running strong at this point, extending a gap over Ryland Richard. It's now about 1.2 seconds separating those two drivers, heading through really the final quarter of this lap around the Nürburgring Nordschleife. Ryland Richard, the driver of the number 69 Flying Eagle Motorsports car, running into some difficulties heading through a section of the track which is oh so treacherous. You got corners basically non-stop, and in these radical SR10s, as we saw riding on board with Odo himself in that first race when he was stuck behind Vieira, the dirty air can come back to bite you on the butt badly in these SR10s.
Absolutely, it sure can. And yeah, Odo's started to stretch that gap out over Richard now as we see Vieira. I'm sure he's happy to get around Fernandez. Fernandez has been blinking quite a bit, and that is probably the scariest thing to be doing at the Nürburgring, is get behind a car that's flashing, that's having some issues with their internet connection, and just don't know where they're going to pop back up. So I'm sure that's a big sigh of relief on his part. So now he's up to 4th, and he's going to start trying to track down Charles Krasik.
Yeah, got about a 2.5 second gap to try and surmount, but he's got time on his hands. We are only about 6 minutes into this 45-minute long race. Got plenty of laps left on the board, plenty of time left on the board. Got some pit stops to deal with as well. So as much as it may, actually no, I say that it may be an insurmountable gap. It may not be. Vieira, though, he finds himself in the catbird seat. We said if he finishes in P4, he'll tie with Ryan Odo in the championship. He finds himself now in P4 after just one lap around this track, which is really like no other. Joel Jacqueline getting a move done on J.R. Gregory, the interview curse possibly striking our Apex Racing TV colleague there, as he's now dropping down to 8th after a pretty rough start in this race. But completing lap 1, Ryan Odo, Ryland Richard, and Charles Krasik running in the podium positions, but Vieira, the hard charger, up 8 spots and now running in a championship clinching position.
Yeah, a little lock up there from JR coming into Hotzenbach. So he's managed to get the car righted. And yeah, my guess is he just got past going down straight. There's 3 cars there together. They'll probably end up leapfrogging each other several more times before the end of the race if they get stuck together like that. And they're not that far behind Sanchez, so they'll, work their way up, and that'll be a nice 4 or 5 car train as we get going here. And yeah, Vieira is closing that gap down up to Krasik. It's now down to 1.1 seconds. And he's not thinking about finishing P3. He's thinking about catching up to Odo and winning this race. Because, he's at the fastest lap in qualifying. And so he knows he's got the pace in the car. And so I'm sure he's going to say, hey, you know what? I'll pick up what I can here. I'll get a really good pit stop. And then I'll finish him off in the last half of the race. Metaphorically, not literally, finish him off. Make sure that's apparent.
Yeah, Apex Racing TV does not condone the act of murder. Anyways, moving on from that. Oh boy, Jimbo Pfeiffer running in the 9th position, effectively in no man's land. Anyways, getting back on track and talking about Ryan Odo. That was a beautiful camera swap there. Well done, Josh. Beautiful timing. I gotta say, honestly, maybe my perspective's a little bit different, my broadcaster mind kind of playing a role in this, as Vieira gets a move done on Krasik and now moves himself up into a championship contending and championship clinching position, now into 3rd. At this point, though, Ryan Odo, unless he has a perfectly clean race, actually no, even if he has a perfectly clean race and only picks up about 1 incident point, that 1 bonus point that he picks up will not be enough for him to seal the deal in this championship. So Lucas Vieira, he finds himself in a good spot. Even if he did have a clean race, I don't believe Ryan Odo is going to finish with very low incident points, because based off a look that we had at the beginning of this lap, I believe Odo may have a little bit of cosmetic damage on that race car. I'm not sure if we could possibly go back to that camera shot, Josh. Thank you very much. I'm trying to look to see a sort of paint scupping possibly on that number 15 Radical SR10, which is still leading this race 3.2 seconds in front of Ryland Richard in P2. But going back to the point I was going to make, Charles, honestly, maybe my perspective's a little bit different, but if I was Lucas Vieira, I would be like, hey, look, Odo, enjoy your win. I'm winning the championship. You may have won the battle, I won the war. So maybe if I'm Lucas Vieira, I wouldn't even bother fighting with Ryan Odo and dare have a moment that happened at the end of that sprint race. I'll just say, hey, go out and grab your checkered flag. I'm grabbing the championship trophy. So maybe my perspective's a little different. Maybe I'm just petty. Maybe I'm just an asshat. Who knows?
That is one way to think about it. But if the guy, for whether it was intentional or not, the guy turns you in the end of the last race to get the win, you're going to want to try and get back up there and show him that you're not intimidated, and you're going to try and win this feature race here. I will say this: you talked about the cosmetic damage. Maybe I didn't see any on Odo's car, but these curbs, if you catch them the wrong way, they will damage that front splitter. So you might can get damage on that car without even getting off track just from the way you handle some of these curbs.
Yeah, heading through that section like the carousel. That section is always, I can't even describe it. I mean, I've said in this section that we're seeing Ryan Odo go through right now that you're always quite tensed up. Heading through there, though, I just feel like my car is getting rattled to death heading through a section like that. It is, yeah, I can very much compare it. It's definitely an apples to broccoli comparison, but I can compare it to like Dover Raceway for a NASCAR stock car. IndyCar raced there back in the 90s, many moons ago, and the cars were literally being shaken to death, essentially. So for some of these drivers, they may be experiencing that same amount of difficulties heading through the carousel.
I'm going to give you a better NASCAR comparison than Dover. I'm going to give you Darlington, because Darlington is very much like the carousel it has two very distinct lines and very distinct angles of entry, angles of banking throughout the corners. So that is very much like what you're dealing with the carousel. The fastest way around, believe it or not, is on the inside, even though you're basically being yanked around by centripetal force and just trying to carry speed and just letting the bank work. The outside is just that much slower, even though it's a smoother surface, because you don't have the banking helping you. It's about a second slower if you get kicked out of the carousel, as we'll see. The mini version of that coming up here was a little bit better on the outside, but not much.
Yeah, it is still quite choppy for these race cars. Joel Jacklin experiencing that pain, and that was a mega sideways snap for Sanchez coming out of the corner. He was going side by side with Fernandez a couple of moments ago, but all three of these race cars are going to be converging onto each other. Meanwhile, Vieira getting a move done to slip his way up into second, trying to seal the deal in that Pro Championship by looking at this fight with Joel Jacklin, Franco Sanchez, and Adrian Fernandez. This is a fight like no other. Three drivers battling hard. It's a game of leapfrog with all of them, and you got a car a little bit farther up the road. That's Krasik involved in this fight, so he may get involved if he has a terrible run coming out of the final corner, and we could see Sanchez close up to him. There we go, Sanchez getting that move done on Krasik. Shows you how powerful the slipstream is in these Radical SR10s, and he may be getting shuffled back even more. Fernandez and Jacklin following along. So Krasik, the one punching the hole in the air, looks like he has some damage on the front end of that race car, so that could be the reason why he's dropping back. But nevertheless, a disastrous run heading down that long flat-out blast for Krasik as Fernandez comes down pit lane. So this is one of the first drivers that we've seen come into the pits without any further incidents, sparking their call to come down pit lane, and Krasik following.
I did see Fernandez's car kind of fix itself, so he had some damage on the left side, and I kind of watched it as he used his fast repair kind of get pushed back out. So he definitely hit some barriers somewhere during the course of those first couple of laps, and Krasik as well. So now Krasik's got his car repaired. They came back out around where Jimbo Pfeiffer is, so Fernandez in front of Pfeiffer, Krasik just behind, so Krasik will have a rabbit to chase and see if he can make up some of that time. But it'll be interesting to see these early pitters, if that makes any difference. We'll have to keep an eye on Fernandez and Krasik, where they come out in relation to Sanchez and Jacklin after they've made their pit stops later.
Yeah, I'll be honest, Charles, of the times that I've been doing sim racing broadcasting, which stretches now all the way back to March of last year, I've never done a race at this racetrack where pit stops have played a factor. I've done many Radical SR10 broadcasts around this racetrack, but those are usually the official races that are just 4 laps long, and if you come down pit lane, it's probably because you got involved in some sort of trouble out there on the race course. But I gotta say, okay, there had to have been a moment, because Vieira, at least according to my live timing screen, is now within 3 seconds of Odo. Odo's had a moment in time. He's lost out on a boatload of time to Lucas Vieira. This is now a huge fight between these two drivers. My apologies there, folks. This is, oh boy, Vieira, I gotta say, credit where credit's due to Lucas Vieira. After the way things went for him in that 15-minute long sprint race, you wouldn't blame the man at all for feeling a little bit dejected. The fact your 16-point championship gap that may have turned into an insurmountable one coming into the final race of this evening's action here from the Radical Americas Championship for 2024, you wouldn't blame the man at all for being a little bit disheartened and being like, hey, look, at this point, what else can I do? But he is throwing punches. Odo, meanwhile, just got beached on the curb, and he lost out on a boatload of time there a couple of moments ago. You can see that gap is slowly being whittled away. It's not seconds that are being shaven away every single sector, but Vieira, it's like a nail file. He is slowly whittling away at it until in the not-too-distant future, that nail is completely gone. That gap is completely gone. Lucas Vieira, after nailing the wall at the end of that sprint race, is looking to maybe nail a move on Odo to be like, hey, look, you thought I was over. Game, set, match, buddy. I'm here to fight, and I'm here to win this championship. Vieira, credit where credit's due to the man. He has not given up, and he has been fighting with gumption and vengeance for this 45-minute long feature.
Yeah, absolutely. And so when we're looking at the sector times a few seconds ago, Josh had pulled them up for us. And Odo was 3 seconds slower in Sector 2, which I think Sector 2 is going to be somewhere around Flugplatz, Schreidenkreuz, or Ehrenberg. So those three corners, the Flugplatz is just before the little straightaway. Schreidenkreuz is just after it. It's a very, very difficult left-hander that you have to get pretty much dead on going through there, or you'll end up going wide into the grass. And Ehrenberg very much that same way, except it's that very hard braking right-hander that takes you down the hill into foxholes. So my guess is that's, without looking at a replay, that's probably where the mistake was made. But it has allowed Vieira to get within 2 seconds, and he was, in the last lap, he was a half second faster. Had set the fastest lap of the race with a 6:19.37. So he was making up the ground, and then Odo gave him a really big hand.
I genuinely, I cannot express this enough, folks. This drive that we're seeing from Lucas Vieira is so impressive. This is a mighty drive, and it is a championship-winning drive that we're seeing from Vieira. At this point, though, I'm curious if he's even going to try and challenge Odo. I mean, I would maybe be a little bit hesitant. I'm sure. I mean, okay, we're kind of painting, at least just from my perspective, I feel like I'm painting Odo in a bad light. Ryan Odo, from the chats that we've had with him thus far, is a fantastic racer. From the stuff we've seen with him thus far this season, he is a fantastic racer. 99% of the time thus far this season, he has been clean, he has been fast, and he has been fantastic to watch. He's younger than me, I believe. This kid is definitely in either middle or high school, but he is wickedly fast in a Radical SR10, which is not an easy car in the world of iRacing in any way, shape, or form. So credit where credit's due to Ryan Odo. He is a fast driver. He's been a brilliant driver to follow thus far this season. The only major hiccup was really that incident with himself and Lucas Vieira, which, as much as it was a major setback for Vieira, I don't think it's going to set him back at all. He had about 20-ish minutes. We're coming to the start of lap 4, and I believe we may see a pass between these two in the not-too-distant future if Vieira wants to go for it. After how things went at the end of that sprint race, I wouldn't blame him at all, Charles, if he decided to maybe play it a little bit cautious.
Yeah, it's at least at the beginning. But once again, obviously, winning the race is very important. So that's what they're going to want to do. So yeah, I would say, oh wow. So 6:18 dead for Vieira that lap. That's an amazing lap time. You know, obviously Odo's was a little bit off because of the issue he had during that lap, but that's just, I mean, that was a second faster than anything we saw in the first race or in qualifying, if I remember correctly. So a monster lap for Vieira, and really didn't have a lot of draft help there. He had already pretty much made his way around everybody. So it's just basically Odo and then him, and he's not quite in draft range to get anything off of Odo. So that's just Vieira's natural pace, and he's just doing a fantastic job in that Radical.
Yeah, this is an absolutely brilliant drive from Lucas Vieira, closing out all the noise and just being able to put your nose to the grindstone and get the job done. Vieira, I think we're going to be riding on board with him, Josh, honestly, because it's like watching Picasso paint a painting. It is like watching poetry in motion, folks. This is absolutely fantastic around a racetrack like this with so much challenge thrown in. I mean, folks, I've told you a lot throughout this season that I have done a lot of Radical broadcasts here on Apex Racing TV. I used to cover the Friday official series from about Season 1 of 2023 when I first started doing broadcasting, period, all the way up until the end of last season. I've done at least one broadcast of this series. for at least one season for quite some time now, so I'm familiar with how these cars race. I'm familiar with broadcasts with them, and I've driven this car a heck of a lot myself. This car is not easy. It tends towards understeer. It's so hard to try and get those tires lit up, get yourself in some sort of groove, and I haven't even mentioned the brakes. There's such a thin margin. It's a razor thin margin in these Radical SR10s between holding up in time or ending up, I mean, considering we're racing at the Nordschleife, you get a little bit wrong heading into some of the heavy braking zones around this racetrack. You may end up in Denmark if you get that a little bit squirrely, and you could just have a major lockup as well. There's such a razor-thin margin for the brakes. It's so difficult to try and get the tires lit up, and just keeping that thing on the racetrack around a racetrack like this where you have killer curbs that can bounce you off the racetrack like you're a ping pong ball in the blink of an eye. We're on a racetrack as well with no runoff area really to speak of around its 14-mile layout. This is just absolutely brilliant stuff for all of these drivers out there. You know, we glorify Vieira, we glorify Odo. They are absolutely brilliant drivers, but as are all of these drivers in this series. It's been a fantastic honor to cover the racing action that we've had thus far, but the racing action is still set to continue. Gotta say, that gap between Odo and Vieira, I wouldn't say it's stagnating. However, I don't really think it's going down with the same gumption that it was before. And I think the main reason why that's the case, Charles, is because I think Lucas Vieira has finally hit Odo's dirty air.
Yeah, I think you may be right. You can see them. You can see Vieira. It's not a Sunday drive he's doing out there. He is having to work that car just a little bit. You can see him, have to catch the front a little bit, have to catch the rear every once in a while. Just kind of do some corrective steering to get the car to loop around the corner properly. As you can see, he's still really driving well. And yeah, the gap is about where it was when they started the lap. It's about 1.8, 1.9 seconds. But you can see how on it he is. He's really pushing the car. And Odo as well. So I want to go check in on one of my favorites if we get a chance, Josh. I want to check in on Luis Perez because, we talked about him just going out there and competing and finishing races. He's still out on the track. He's still running in P10. He's still managing to get the car around the corners, and that's a good thing to see from a less experienced driver. We'll say it like that.
And you can see him wheeling this car around the racetrack. He's running in 10th at the moment, and I don't think we've really talked about him at all throughout the broadcast. He has had a very clean show thus far. 23 coming up to 24 minutes into this 45-minute long race, the final 45-minute long race of what has been an overall brilliant season to follow here on Apex Racing TV. I've had a fantastic schedule of tracks as well. It all began on February the 18th, running at Monza at the first chicane. Then we went to tracks like Sebring on March the 10th, Watkins Glen on April the 7th, Interlagos, Barber, Road America, Alton Park, WeatherTech Raceway, Laguna Seca, Phillip Island, Brands Hatch. We went to Spa last time out, and we round the season off tonight at the Nordschleife. It has been a very long season, 8 months for a season here on Apex Racing TV. In broadcasting terms, at least from my experience, that's pretty much forever for a series to last, but it has been brilliant to follow thus far this season. And the fact we come into this last race, not even the last round, the last race point-blank period of this season, with a championship fight still on our mind, speaks volumes about how competitive and exciting this season has been to follow.
Yeah, it really has. It's been great. I hate that I missed the first round, but I'm very, very happy that I got to do the rest of the races. So we see that car sparking, it looked like, that Cedric Oyan. Haven't really seen him, but it looks like he's got some damage on the right-hand side, where he may have had some contact with some barrier during the course of this lap. Definitely off the pace. He's about, looking at it, he's probably 10K down as he's coming up the hill, Klostertal, getting ready to go through Bravery Corner. As we get back to the front with Joel Jacqueline and Franco Sanchez making the move around. So now Sanchez now up to 4th position. So the top 4 cars are pro cars. Odo, Vieira, Richard, and Sanchez. Jacqueline in 5th. Gregory's made his way back up to P6. So Fernandez is down to 7th. Krasik at 8th. Both of those cars, Krasik has gotten around Pfeiffer after his pit stop. So now you've got 4 pros, 4 AMs, and then Pfeiffer, Perez, Oyan, Unger is still out on the track. I think had issue on lap 1. And then Vickery and Benlid had said, no, we're going to pass tonight.
Yeah, I can't necessarily blame drivers for wanting to skip out because, I mean, I've seen in the official series in the past some drivers being like, hey, look, really fast in the series, no, for the Nordschleife, and can't necessarily blame them at times. I don't know, maybe I just have a soft spot in my heart for this track as Krasik has made is this another run for Charles Krasik to come down pit lane? I feel like we've seen him come down pit lane before, so Krasik having another run into the pits. Not sure what's happened to the driver of the 53 car. He stopped in his box, so this is not some sort of penalty, a drive-through penalty at all. I think there may have been some sort of incident, possibly. Gonna try and find a replay to see what went wrong. We're gonna take a look at a replay of something involving Cedric Oyahan, the driver of the 44 car. May have had an off-track moment right before the carousel. This is probably turn like 68 around this racetrack, and there you go, running off the circuit, beaching himself on the curb. And around this racetrack, those curbs more so urban plateaus around this track, which is actually just a toll road in Germany. Gonna try and find what happened to Krasik here in the 53.
Yep, just looks like he's on the ragged edge there coming through Hotzenbach. Yep, just too much, carrying too much speed through there. Manages to get that car caught, picked up. Did not make contact as far as I could see. So maybe with somewhere else on the track, but yeah, he's definitely in the. That's definitely his second time in. So maybe with the early pit, he didn't have enough fuel. I'm not sure because his second stop wasn't very long. It was only 16.7. So maybe they've got just enough fuel or the fuel is not lasting as long as it would normally do on a normal circuit. That's not Nürburgring.
Yeah, gotta say, some of these drivers, there's a little bit of confusion coming into the last race of this season about fuel mileage and what these drivers would be able to do, even though we had 44 minutes of practice before qualifying and before this broadcast even started on Apex Racing TV tonight. Not a lot of drivers getting a whole lot of time out there and trying to get a good run together to figure out how exactly you can stretch a tank of gas. Little bit up in the air for these drivers, and speaking of up in the air, Vieira hoping not to end up in the air like he did at the end of the sprint race earlier on. He's now got a fight on his hands with himself and Odo. Vieira, at this point in time, we said coming into this final race of this championship, if he finishes third or better, even if Odo wins it, that is game, set, match for this pro championship. But he wanted to come out swinging. Swings out the carousel, though, so that's a little bit of a mistake. The first little trip up that we've seen from Lucas Vieira thus far heading through a section, which is very easy to get wrong in these SR10s. So losing out on a little bit of time, so this fight between himself and Odo going to cool off a little bit, but platform 4 3/4 is still going to end up the same way with Vieira on track to try and grab that pro championship. That P2 spot would see him and that championship gap go down to 4 points. However, it would still be a championship gap swinging in the Brazilians' favor. Both of these drivers have been fantastically exciting to follow this season, and with the final 15 minutes of this race set to begin in a couple of seconds' time, we've still got a fight between these two, and we haven't even talked about the prospect of these drivers coming down pit lane in the next few laps, which they have to do.
Exactly right. Yeah. So it's I was going to mention that we were getting back to this lead battle that's kind of stretched out a little bit, but it was a half second. We talked about Vieira with this 18 dead last lap. Odo matched it this lap with this previous lap with an 18 dead of his own, but then Vieira with a 17.5. So still took a half second off of him on track. But yeah, made that one mistake. Just carried too much speed into the carousel, spit him out, cost him about a half a second or so. So now he's going to have to go back and make that time up, which seems like he's more than capable of doing. And the gap is now 1.1. And so we'll see how much time from this distance, how much time he can make up going down the Dottinger Hoe. I'd be interested to see how much of a draft he can get from that distance.
Yeah, usually about 1.5 seconds is that boundary to get the slipstream in these SR10s, and you can see it right now. That gap is slowly but surely running down between these two. It was about 1.2 seconds going on to this long flat-out blast towards the end of the 5th lap of this race. It's now rapidly closing within 0.5 second between these two. I'm getting flashbacks to the end of that sprint race. Don't go for it, Lucas. Don't go for it, Lucas. Will he go for it? Will Lucas try and get that move done? He's backing out of it, understandably so. But again, these drivers have to worry about a pit stop as well. And I'm curious if they're going to come in together. They are going to come in together. Beautiful timing on that. But Vieira and Odo, this is the money stop. Vieira in a fantastic spot to seal the deal in that championship. Odo, meanwhile, he needs to hope for a miracle and hope for an Acme falling anvil to come and slam on top of the head of Vieira at the end of this race. But Vieira with a blisteringly quick run down pit lane, 0.3 seconds quicker. There is nothing between those drivers coming out of pit lane, and it was nothing between them in terms of their time in the pits either. Only 0.2 seconds. And when you see this series and how close these gaps have been, those 0.2 spent down pit lane and those 0.3 spent stopped in the box can make the world of difference between these two. Odo now running in P2, Ryland Richard staying out for yet another lap. However, Richard is still within striking distance, so we could see Ryland Richard be the one deciding the fight between Odo and Vieira for the final checkered flag of this season.
Yeah, they're going to have to be very careful. Obviously, Richard's going to be on low fuel after they just came into the pits. He's obviously got good pace. He was running P3. So, you know, obviously not quite the pace that those two guys had, but still was running very well. So he's going to be a bit of a problem for them to have to solve. Hopefully they get it solved without any contact during the course of this lap.
Yeah, fingers crossed they can get that little squirmish that they had. That's not a word in the English language. Hopefully they can get that little squabble that they had and that sprint race a little bit farther behind them. They don't have to worry about that. Some very odd choice of vernacular here on this broadcast tonight here on Apex Racing TV. I can't even say it's late. It's only about 9:37 here on the East Coast as it stands currently. Ooh, Vieira close to the grass on the exit. Sorry to budge in there, Charles.
Yeah, no worries. Yeah, Admiral Forest was one of my favorite yet hated corners. It's just it's so difficult because you have to be right up on that curb. Some cars you can take the curb, some cars you can't. I haven't really seen anybody try to jump up on it to get the better entry into the right hand part of that. But yeah, you've just made up a new word, so I'm very proud of that. So it's a combination of a squabble and a skirmish. So we've got a skirmish. So yeah, I'm you know, people make up words all the time. So that's how English you know, propels itself forward. So I'm okay with it.
God bless America, coming up with some new phrases here from the Radical Americas Championship here from 2024 on Apex Racing TV. Got to send a word into our boss here at Apex to maybe get some T-shirts made of the word that I can barely remember. It was squirmish, was it?
Yeah.
I'm trying to remember what I even said. Full transparency, folks. Maybe there's a little bit of crow brain from me or some broadcaster brain, but nevertheless, usually immediately after I say something, I occasionally tend to forget it. But squirmish, I think that is going to go down in the history books as one of the most odd things that I've said on the air here in my time on Apex Racing TV. Looking at the other field out there on the racetrack, still here's Jimbo Pfeiffer. Good lord, showing a lot of skill at the moment. He's running in the 8th position. Had a pretty rough first race. He's currently running about 1:19 back of our race leader, Ryland Richard, who is still in front of Odo and Vieira. Those two cars, though, covered by barely any air. It's only 1.5 tenths between the two of them. Now, with less than 10 minutes on the clock, I believe, unless I'm very much mistaken, Charles, we may be coming to white flag next time by.
It's going to be close. It's going to be close. We'll see where they end up. Yeah, but, you know, with a 6.5 minute lap, they're just past the halfway point of the lap. So 3 minutes left, 38.7. Yeah, maybe 2 laps. So just some quick mental math there. So we'll see. One way or the other, I think Richard's going to have to come in and pit this time because he's basically at the breaking point of the fuel with 36 minutes gone in the race. You can't imagine him being able to go into the 40 minutes at Nürburgring on the fuel that these guys are allocated for the race.
Yeah, he's going to have to come down pit lane eventually, and I got to say that gap between himself and Ryan Odo has pretty much entirely diminished in the span of the past couple of moments. It was about 2.5 seconds. Now it's under 1.5 seconds, coming up to only 1 second, and even though Ryland Richard is not involved in this fight in terms of position, he's still yet to make his stop, has to do that probably this time by, well, definitely this time by, considering that there's barely any time left on the clock. He's still going to decide this fight between Odo and Vieira because Ryland Richard is going to act as a little bit of a rolling roadblock with these two, certainly creating a whole lot of dirty air that is not ideal for either of those drivers heading through the tight and twisties towards the end of this lap here around the Nürburgring Nordschleife. But at this point in time, both of them are going to be in the draft with only about 0.2 seconds separating the two of them, heading their way up into the mini carousel for what could be this just second to last time in this race. Odo and Vieira are setting ourselves up for what is going to be a dramatic conclusion to this final race of the final round of the 2024 Radical Americas Championship. Ryland Richard is going to be leading them heading on to the long flat-out blast at the end of the lap, but Odo and Vieira are the drivers that I want to keep my eyes on because they're going to be blowing Ryland Richard's metaphorical doors off as they go side by side. The gap between those two closing. Odo closing to the back of Ryland Richard. Richard is going to be involved in this fight whether he likes it or not. I think he's backing out of it. He wants nothing to do with these drivers. Gotta be side by side yet again. Look at Ryland Richard slipping into the draft of Lucas Vieira. Will he try and go for it on the Brazilian, or is he going to try and play spoiler? That remains to be determined. Looks like he's going to back out of it. Doesn't want to play spoiler. He wants to try and stay focused on his own race as he's probably eyeing up a pit stop at the end of this lap. But thankfully for Ryan Odo, he withstands that difficulties with Ryland Richard, who has now made that run to come down pit lane. It's now a 2-horse fight, and it's a dogfight between some of the best drivers in this series, a young American of Ryan Odo and the experienced vet of Lucas Vieira, separated by 0.5 second, heading into what I believe, trying to do the quick maths in my head, is possibly not the final lap of the race.
Yeah, I don't think so. I'd like to go back and look and just see if we can get a car coming across the start-finish line and see if the flag was waving or not. But I think we still got another lap. So I think this is the penultimate lap of the race. And we'll see what Vieira does. If he just kind of hangs behind Odo, waits for that last lap to come into play. And so we'll just kind of keep an eye on that as we go. Obviously, he's got the pace to make the move. These cars, basically, these two guys are just neck and neck as far as the pace is concerned. We see Odo with a little blinking. So now he's having maybe a little technical issue with his connection. So that's another little thing that we'll have to watch as we're coming down into Ehrenberg, this hard right-hander, as we head down the hill toward Foxhole.
Those serial box Wi-Fi routers continue to play a factor in these races. Gotta love iRacing. iRacing, credit where credit's due to them. They put on some pretty good racing, and it's fantastic to have a platform like iRacing, but occasionally you do get some connection issues like that. I've done some side-by-side battles with some drivers where it looked like the other car was trying to do a sim race from the International Space Station. That was a mega sideways snap for Odo. This may be the opportunity that Vieira needs to get that move done to take the lead of this race. Now it's less than 5 minutes on the clock, heading their way through one of the fastest sections of this racetrack, one of the most challenging challenging ones as well. There's a driver that went off there at the very beginning of the race. That, I believe, was Vickery, who went off the track at the very beginning of that sprint race earlier on this evening here on Apex Racing TV. That is such a tricky section of this racetrack, as if the rest of the sections of this racetrack aren't tricky enough as is. But these drivers feeling the burn, they're feeling the pressure, and some more drivers coming down pit lane. That's Adrian Fernandez stopped in his box. I think he's been stopped for a while. I think there may have been a moment for the AM driver. What in the world has happened to him?
I think he towed back, so he'll be stuck there for a while. I was watching was kind of keeping one eye on timing and scoring as we saw not just Richard but J.R. Gregory and Joel Jacklin also, I believe, came out to pit road. And I think Fernandez came back out, was coming through as they were coming back out. I'm not going to say that there was any contact or anything, but shortly after that, Fernandez towed back to the pits. So I think that's race done for him. It's going to take, 6+ minutes to get the car towed back around, and then whatever repair he might have to have. So maybe either that could have been something as simple as just to have enough fuel to complete the lap. So he said, better just tow it.
Yeah, this could be it for Adrian Fernandez.
Behind, that was Jacklin.
Ooh, into the wall.
Just straight into the wall. That was kind of weird. That just drove straight, like maybe he had, he's been having internet connectivity issues. Maybe he had a hardware failure. It just lost his steering and just had no other option other than just the car just went straight. Normally that doesn't happen. Normally it makes a hard left depending on what model of wheel and pedals you have. But I have seen it where you lose the connection for just a minute, and the next thing you know, it's too late to do anything about it.
Honestly, Charles, I think that may have just been an old-fashioned mistake for him heading off through a very tricky section at the beginning of the lap. Those do happen as well. Yes, they do, especially with the clobber curbs that we have around this racetrack. Looked like he ran wide, hang through the first bit, and set himself up horribly for the second part of that section that we just saw David Unger head through right now. He's running in 10th at the moment, well farther back of our leader, which is still Ryan Odo. Looked like he hit that curb, had a fairly shallow run heading into the second part of that section, and that just sent him off into the wall. These drivers still pushing it hard up and down the grid. Gotta say, one driver that's still pushing it hard is Ryan Odo. Vieira's still pushing it too, as those two cars covered by about a half a second tick over that. I have a feeling, unless I'm very much mistaken, that Vieira may be taking it a bit easy on this lap. And there could be two reasons for that, Charles. With about 2-ish minutes on the clock, they're about to head their way off into what I really consider the final section of corners around this racetrack before they head off into the mini carousel. Not a whole lot of time left, only a minute and a half left on the clock. This is going to be borderline as to whether or not we're taking the checkered this time or the white. So maybe that could be the reason why Vieira's kicked on the afterburners. He was thinking maybe you had one more lap of racing action here from the Radical Americas Championship, the final race of the final round of the season. Vieira, he wants to try and get the move done, not for the championship, because if he remains in P2, that'll still be game, set, match when it comes to that pro championship fight, but he is here to impress, and he's here to put on a show. He tried to get a move done on Ryan Odo earlier on in the race. That ended an absolute disaster for the Brazilian. It put him on the back burner. He had to make his way up through the field, had to make his way up 10 spots when everything is said and done from this race. The real question is he going to make it up 11? You can see him going through the gears, back up into 6th, back down into 5th, back up into 6th again. Looking at the clock, I think they're going to be taking the white flag this time by, which means one more lap, 14 more miles, and 154 corners left to go around this racetrack. Ryan Odo going to be leading it, coming to the white flag. The real question is he going to be the one leading, coming to that checkered in about 6 minutes time? Look at pace-wise, those two evenly match. Odo having a big sideways snap coming out of the corner. This may be the opportunity that Vieira takes advantage of. He wants to try and snag the victory. He doesn't need to do it for the championship, but he is doing it for all-out glory. The driver of the 171 car has been a wheelman thus far this season. He's taken more checker flags than we can count, but he still found himself in a championship fight. Entered this race, entered this final round of the championship with a 16-point gap over Ryan Odo right in front. After that incident, though, it went down to just 6. He had his back up against the ropes, but Vieira came out in this race, and he came out swinging. They had to deal with the pit stops, usually a big factor in this race, and it was. However, these two still stayed line astern. Vieira, though, he's still got the draft, which is oh so important in these Radical SR10 races, and heading through one of the fastest sections of the racetrack, heading into Arnberg for the final time. This is a good overtaking opportunity. Will Vieira take advantage of it? I don't think he's going to. Backing out of it, Vieira playing the smart game.
Yeah, he is. He's just waiting. He knows he's in a prime position. He's just got to stay on Odo's tail to get to that final straightaway, to make that move to the end. He's seen what the car is capable of as far as the draft. He picked up about 1 second a few laps ago, coming down the Dottinger, and was able to just lift at the very end to not make the move. So he knows where he needs to be. He knows where the sweet spot is, as far as how much gap he needs between him and Odo to make the pass, make it stick, and not give Odo a chance to recover and make a pass of his own. So now it's just a matter of just getting through the rest of this lap clean, getting to that back stretch, and then that's where the fireworks will start up again.
And you know, all throughout the season, Charles, even at the tightest and twistiest of racetracks, we haven't really talked about this too much. The tires are usually fine when it comes to the end of these races. I don't think they're going to be fine. I think the main thing that's going to decide this fight between Ryan Odo and Lucas Vieira is going to be which one of these drivers has a bit more meat on the bone, which driver has a bit more meat on their tires, and which driver is going to feel even more confident in their race car. If Odo doesn't feel confident, Vieira, even with that dirty air, is possibly going to have that leg up on him. Any gap can disappear in the blink of an eye going onto that long flat-out blast at the end of these races. So Odo going to try and use that clean air as best as possible. The real question is, though, Charles, will he be able to pull a safe enough gap come time for the end of this race?
Yeah, that's going to be tough. It's going to basically end up being a mistake by Vieira that's going to give him that gap. So Vieira is going to have to be very careful to not push the issue too much. But yeah, if you're talking about tires as far as who's going to have the advantage, from what I've seen with Odo, he's really pushing the limits on the tires. I've seen him several times just kind of, not necessarily in a half spin, but really trying to just get that car yawed around the back end, kind of sliding out to help him make it through the corners. So if I was going to give an advantage to either of these drivers, I would probably give it to Vieira. Just I think Vieira's been a little more cautious through the corners. Odo's maybe pushing a little bit much, as we see the connection from Odo just kind of drop out again as they work their way into the carousel for the final time. Ooh, Odo's out.
Oh, and a moment for Odo. He jumps out of the banking, and that's the opportunity that Vieira seizes to take the lead of this race. It's now Vieira's game. The ball is very much in Lucas Vieira's hands. The Brazilian, he was going to be in the dirty air, but he was going to have the draft come time for the end of this race. He's now inherited the lead after a costly mistake from Ryan Odo. Odo, the driver of the number 15 car, who pretty much has a car number that just about matches his age. The young man from America has been incredibly consistent so far this season. He has rarely, if ever, put a foot wrong, and it seems like the one big mistake he makes may be the one that puts that championship out of reach. Vieira was still in a good spot, though, but this is an even better spot to find himself in. He's got the clean air, he's got the pace advantage, but he's got the spirit as well. Odo, at this point, though, he's going to be kicking himself after that mistake heading through the carousel, but thankfully for him, we have got a nearly 2-mile flat-out blast between now and the end of this race. We're on the white flag, folks. Only one more lap of racing action. Really, it's not one more lap. It's about a quarter of a lap of racing action here from not just this race, not just this round, but the entirety of the 2024 Radical Americas Championship. It looks like the championship is very much in Vieira's hands unless some drama happens, which we saw at the the end of that sprint race. Now the shoe is on the other foot. Vieira was the one attacking in that sprint race. Now it's Odo going to be the one attacking. I'm curious if those drivers are going to remind themselves of what happened in that first race this evening and think, hey, that's the way I was raced. I'm not going to give them the same treatment. I'm not going to treat this race like sunshine, lollipops, and rainbows. I want this checkered flag, I want this victory, and I want to finish in front of them. But the real question is, who's going to finish in front of who going on to that long flat-out blast for the final time? That gap is minuscule between those two. They are damn near bump drafting each other. The bump draft not really allowed in this series, so Odo trying to time this run as best as he can. He's flashing the headlights. He's got to run. He's got the speed. Will he be able to get the move done, though, is the real question. He's playing really patient with this. He's saving it not for the end of the straightaway, but after they go under the bridge, go down the hill, then back up the hill. This is a section where they came to blows, but I just don't think Ryan Odo is going to risk it. As much as he wants to grab the victory, he knows either way the championship is going to be in the hands of this man, the Brazilian. Lucas Vieira in the 171 car is your 2024 Radical America's Pro Champion, and he had to fight like hell to get the job done, making up 11 spots in this race and treating us to some badass donuts when everything is said and done. Vieira with a champion's drive to become our champion.
Yeah, that was a great race. And obviously I was listening to our producer Josh saying, did Odo maybe do that on purpose to jump out of the carousel? Which I won't gonna lie, I kind of thought the same thing there myself for a minute. It looked like coming down the backstretch, he was really just kind of letting off and kind of timing it for the last minute. But I think what he found out was he waited a little bit too late. He said, you know what, I'm not going to risk wrecking him again or wrecking either of us again. So I'm going to just go ahead and just say, you know what, I finished second. I'll take the second in the race. I'll take the second in the championship, and we'll go to the World Finals.
Yeah, it looks like Lucas Vieira is going to be the one victorious from this season, and we're going to see a whole lot of him in the World Finals, which is going to be broadcasted here on Apex Racing TV. Certainly going to be touching on that between now and the end of this broadcast, capping off a fantastic season of racing action here from the 2024 Radical America's Championship. It was a beautiful season from start to finish, full of amazing racing, beautiful moments, and in the end, the driver who's victorious in the pro category is a driver who was victorious multiple times this season. Lucas Vieira is the champion when everything is said and done, and he had to fight. It was basically a fight to the death between those two. They occasionally came to blows. They had their flare-ups, but they put on some fantastic racing throughout this season. It was brilliant watching those two, and even though Ryan Odo doesn't come up as your champion from this season, you gotta say credit where credit's due to him, being as young as he is, being as patient as he is, and being as consistent as he is as well. P2 may sting a little bit, but we're probably going to see him in the World Finals as well. And I think if we pick out some racetracks, he is probably going to be a driver that we are going to have our eyes pried on from start to finish.
Yeah, I don't think that there's a racetrack we could put out there that he's not going to excel at. He's been great from the start of the season to the end of the season. He's always been in contention for the win. And so, yeah, so bright things from Odo and more to come, I'm sure. But yeah, great race by Vieira, starting way back in the back after the incident at the end of the sprint race. Was aggressive, patiently aggressive, aggressively patient, whichever way you want to say that, was able to work his way up. And, I think because he did that so quickly, that put him in a real position to battle. I think if he would have been a little more cautious, and it might not have had the same results. I think he did exactly what he needed to do to get up there in contention. As we see, that might be something on my screen there, but I saw the front of a car go. Yep. Luis Perez's front end has removed itself down the straightaway. So, but you know what? I'm gonna give a shout out. He finished 10th in the first race, 9th in the second race. He's our lowest rated driver in the series, but he's always been out there. And for finishing the race, even though if you've only got part of your car left, just finishing a race at the Nürburgring is an accomplishment in itself. So hats off to Luis. Great job. We see Unger working his way around to finish up his race to finish 8th overall. So we'll have him and then Pires to finish. Something happened with Sanchez in that last couple of laps. So I'm not sure what happened, but he ended up towing back and ended up finishing in 10th place overall. We saw the damage on Owayan's car. He did manage to finish the race. Fernandez, we did not really see what happened, but well, we did. I take that back, where he just kind of put it in the wall. And so, great job by all these guys for the entire season. It's been fantastic from race 1, lap 1 to the final finisher here at the Nürburgring, and can't wait to see what the World Finals bring.
The World Finals are going to be absolutely fantastic. Coming here to Apex Racing TV in about 1 month's time, we are going to be talking a whole lot about that before we wrap things up tonight and wrap things up for what has been a beautifully entertaining season from start to finish. Gotta say, when I signed up for this series all the way back in, I believe it was probably about January, when I signed up for this series, right before the series started in the middle of February, I was thinking, about 8 months of broadcasting, this is going to be a little bit broken apart and going to be a little bit hard to keep track of, but we saw some drivers rise up to the top and be the creme de la creme in this series, and the driver who ends up being the cremedest of the la cremes, if that's even any sort of form of terminology at all. Making up a whole lot of new terms here on Apex Racing TV tonight, but the driver who ends up victorious from the final race of this season and the champion is the Brazilian, the maestro in this series, Lucas Vieira, your winner here at the Nordschleife from the 45-minute long feature, and your champion here from the 2024 Radical Americas Championship. Ryan Odo finishes on the racetrack in P2. You gotta give the man credit, to the kid credit, whatever you want to refer to him as. He is a brilliant driver, and I honestly think we're going to be seeing a whole lot of him in the sim. Going to be seeing a whole lot of him in the World Finals come time for that in about a month's time here on Apex Racing TV. Those two were in a class of their own all season long. Rylan Richard, though, credit where credit's due to him. Didn't see too much of him, and he skipped out on a few races for very interesting reasons, being a part of the aerial acrobatics for the pre-race ceremonies for the IndyCar Grand Prix of Iowa weekend, the High V doubleheader back in the summer. He rounded out your podium in 3rd when everything is said and done. I had a little bit too much WD-40 Tower SDK graphics here tonight, so a little bit slippery, so we're going to try and put on some gloves and catch them here to get them back up on screen. There we go. Our Apex Racing TV colleague J.R. Gregory ends up the AM victor when everything is said and done, finishing P4 overall. Joel Jacqueline finishes right behind in 5th. Jimbo Pfeiffer gonna finish in 6th. Charles Krasik in P7. David Unger in P8. Luis Pires in P9. And Franco Sanchez, after that incident earlier, going to round out your overall top 10. Cedric Oyahan, Adrian Fernandez, Tyler Vicroy, and John Benlid going to round out your top 14. All the drivers classified from a brilliant feature race here from the Radical Sim Racing Americas Championship for 2024. And Charles, we got some drivers waiting in the interview waiting area. Who would you like to have a chat with first?
Well, let's talk to our championship and race feature race winner, Lucas Vieira. So, Lucas, congratulations. We feel like you got the championship wrapped up. Had a very interesting sprint race, and then a pretty good drive there in the feature race, it must be said. So, talk about it from your perspective.
Hey Charles, hi Ron. Thanks for the finals, the job you're doing. It was super tough race. I didn't think you're gonna make it several times. It was super tough track to overtake here. I didn't think I was gonna make it, but I was stay cool. I was staying behind, waiting for the white spots. Didn't try to risk any move, like dumb moves on places that usually end up in crashes. And at the end, Ryan makes some mistakes. I managed to catch him. At least I did the math before the feature race started. I only need to end up in 4th. So even if I finish in 2nd and 3rd, I was good. I I didn't want to risk anything. That's why I was sitting behind, and he make an honest mistake in carousel. I think we're gonna end up in some fight on the end, but luckily, I'll manage all good on the end.
Yeah, absolutely. We were kind of expecting the same thing, but kind of like he tried to time it and maybe just waited a little bit too late and did not want to try and risk the race ending in the same way the sprint race did, with contact and a crash. So World Finals coming up. So obviously you're going to be one of the guys that we're going to be looking out for. So what are you looking forward to? What are you hoping for the World Finals?
Yeah, that's a funny story. I'm probably gonna make it to the finals. I will have a scheduled traveling that weekend.
Oh.
I mentioned to Sandro. Unfortunately, I won't be able. Best luck for everyone who's in Americas. I wish I could make it, but unfortunately, I won't make it.
Oh, that's terrible to hear. We were looking forward to at least watching or maybe broadcasting it. So who knows? But we'll let you go ahead and give your thanks and shout outs to whoever you would like. This is your time.
Oh yeah, there's a couple few actually. For you guys, as always, because for the entire season was super fun having you guys watching. Every time I finish a race, my wife starts to get angry because I go to YouTube rewatch the whole race, and it's super fun to watch you guys. To Sandro to make this incredible season to the championship, for the guys who are working on the SimRacing Radical SimRacing Americas, for Ryan for the whole season was super fun to drive with him and super fair. At least we have some couple mistakes we both have, so some crashes, but it was pretty fair for both of sides. And for all the guys who drive in, my wife as always, because he was very supportive and he's let me drive, so happy wife as Ron say. And
yeah, exactly.
And I think for everyone's watching, thank you for you guys for the whole season. It was super fun.
Well, Lucas, once again, congratulations. And like I said, we'll miss you in the World Finals, but maybe we'll see you in the Radical Sim Racing America's Cup next season.
Sure. Thanks, guys.
All right. Thank you.
And that right there was Lucas Vieira, our champion here from the 2024 Radical Americas Championship. A season full of exciting action, heart-twisting moments at times for some of these drivers, but it was still a brilliant season to follow from start to finish. And as we've mentioned a lot, the action is not going to be over here with the end of the European and America's Championship, because coming up on Apex Racing TV on November the 17th is going to be the World Finals. We've got a whole lot of action to look forward to. 4 races with 2 pro races and 2 AM races at 2 separate racetracks. That is going to be a whole lot of fun. Last year they were hosted at Road America and Spa, so who knows what kind of tracks we're going to be visiting for that race. But Charles, I gotta say, it has been an honor and a privilege to have shared the commentary booth with you throughout most of the broadcasts this season. Only skipped out on 2 earlier on in the season, and I unfortunately wasn't a part of the last one at Spa, but it has been a brilliant season covering this series, and it's been action-packed from start to finish. Final thoughts on the final race of the season and the season as a whole?
Yeah, the season's been fantastic. So glad to be a part of it. Always enjoying doing the broadcasts here on Apex Racing TV. Yeah, can't wait to see what comes up with the World Finals. That's going to be quite the event. 2 races for both classes, 2 different tracks. So yeah, it's going to be the best of the best, battling to see who's going to be world champion. So I'm just really looking forward to that.
The best of the best fighting to the checkered flag. We got 4 checkered flags, 4 winners that we could possibly see in about a month's time, and it's all gonna be here on Apex Racing TV. That gives you more of a reason to hit that subscribe button and the notification bell so you never miss any of this, because the action is daily here on Apex Racing TV. That concludes it here from the 2024 Radical Americas Championship. The Radical SR10s have really been my broadcasting home here on Apex Racing TV ever since I started, so from my heart to you, thank you to the competitors, the spectators, and everyone involved in making this series possible. It was a blast, it was an honor, and fingers crossed we got a hell of a lot of racing action to look forward to at the World Finals in about a month's time. But for one final time here from the Radical Sim Racing Americas Championship in 2024, that will just about do it. So for myself, Ron Mullins, Charles Bachel joining me in the commentary booth, Josh Wilkie working the cameras in the virtual production hauler, about to go off to have some Thanksgiving dinner, and our champions here of Andy Vocal and Lucas Vieira. I say thank you all so very much for watching, not just this broadcast, this season. Have a great rest of your night, and we hope to see you all wherever it is in the not too distant future.
Are you struggling for consistency in your sim racing? Does your iRating look like a roller coaster? If so, we have good news for you. The way to get more consistent is to first understand what you're doing differently than the professionals. And VRS is the answer. With our competitive subscription, you will have the telemetry, setups, tutorials, and everything else you need to fully analyze your driving. Our data packs and the ability to compare your driving with the best in the world will show you exactly where to adjust your inputs, change your driving line, and shave seconds off of your lap times. And our powerful and precise Direct Force Pro wheelbase and precision pedals are being used by some of the world's best drivers. All these champions agree that VRS hardware is not just the best on the market, it's also priced well below the competition. So if you're looking to upgrade to direct drive and the best pedals in sim racing, VRS is your answer. If you want to get better, get faster, and make it happen sooner rather than later, you owe it to yourself to find out why so many people are switching to VRS. You'll be so glad that you did. Visit www.virtualracingschool.com and learn why the best use VRS.